Hello and welcome to the next installment from the series brought to you by Strengthening the Heartland. I'm Amber Letcher and I'm really excited to see you, well, not see you all, but to have you here with us today. Just a few reminders before we get started. If you would like to follow along with our presentation, there is a handout linked in the handout section of your platform. We also ask that you fill out a short survey for us at the end of the webinar, just so we can get some feedback. This really helps us with future planning. So you'll find the link to that survey in the chat box. And if you're watching this from a recording, you'll be able to find that survey link wherever you access this recording. And finally, throughout the presentation, if you have questions at any time, please feel free to type those into the chat box. We typically go through those at the end of the webinar, but you can type those in at any time. And with that, I'd like to welcome back one of our friends, Amber Leafstedt, who is going to tell us a little bit more about DBT skills. So welcome, Amber.
Thank you, Dr. Letcher. My name is Amber Leafstedt. I am a licensed addiction counselor. I've been working with Strength in the Heartland for some of these webinars. And so bringing to you guys some information over some DBT skills with addicted populations. I've had training with DBT and it is one of my go-tos with the people that I work with. And so thought it might be helpful to bring some of that information to you guys. All right, so just a little brief history with DBT. It was developed in the late 80s, or well, in the 70s, 80s, depending on where you go for your information, it might give you a different date. But it was developed by Marcia Linehan and was developed for the treatment of those with borderline personality disorder and those with who were chronically suicidal. And so that was originally the populations that Marshall Linehan had intended for this mode of therapy. However, in recent years, we've had more and more studies that have shown that DBT can be just as helpful and effective in treating other conditions, including alcohol and drug abuse. So DBT's emphasis is on building a life worth living as a much broader therapeutic goal than simply reduction of problem behaviors or symptom management. And so this is just, again, very, very brief, just kind of what a little bit of history. I would recommend, if you like what you hear throughout this webinar, it intrigues you, you find the information really fits with kind of how you work with your clients or what you've seen, or even in your own life, you can get resources or training or services for DBT. And they can be very, very helpful. Okay, so why DBT for addicted populations? So it is a support-oriented mode of services. It basically works to help individuals identify their strengths and then builds on them. And through this, that person's able to start to feel better about themselves, start to feel more effective in their lives. And as we know, strength-based approaches can be very helpful to those who struggle with addiction. And it's basically meant to help individuals become self-functioning, right? Whether that be while they are in crisis or not, basically enhances their self-worth and their self-efficacy, which can be amazingly helpful for people who have struggled with addictions or who haven't felt very effective in their lives. So again, DBT was originally developed to help people who have borderline personality disorder, which a main characteristics of that is pervasive emotional dysregulation. So very intense emotions, very dysregulated emotions, and oftentimes very impulsive reactions and coping mechanisms for that emotional dysregulation. Therefore, DBT can be really good for people who have often used in order to cope with emotional stress, right? And many people who use, when they first start getting sober, it can be like ripping off a Band-Aid, like it's really sensitive, right? It's maybe you feel things more intensely than you had because for so long you haven't allowed yourself to feel, right? And so when you first start getting clean and getting sober, those emotions can feel overwhelming, they can feel intense, and if you've been using to cope, if you've been using to escape, you probably don't have the skills to be able to not respond in that way. So DBT skills and DBT services can be very helpful in helping provide those individuals with an understanding of their emotions, but also with skills in order to be able to cope without resorting to going back to using. So DBT is also effective when you combine it with other therapy modalities, and so it can be effective on its own, but also when combined. So with motivational approaches or even other behavioral approaches, it can fit very well with other approaches. So DBT is a lot of skill building in 4 main areas. So mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness, distress tolerance, and emotional regulation. And many addicts or individuals who have struggled with addiction in their lives have skill deficit in this area. And so what that means is they don't have the skills, right, for these things. And so oftentimes when addicts or people who are struggling with addiction come to get help, right, or even with the people in their lives, they're told to stop using, cope with your feelings, face your feelings, heal yourself, get your life together, right? And so they're told all of these things, right, which are not untrue things. Those are things that they should be doing and need to be doing, but they don't have the skills to do it, right? Nobody enjoys the pain and suffering that comes with addiction, right? That's not a place that people want to be. And if they knew another way of being, they would. The problem is that most people who are stuck in their addiction, who have been struggling with it, they don't know other ways of being, right? It's what they've always known. Maybe they grew up in dysfunctional households. They grew up in households with addiction. They started using at a very young age, right? At an age when they were supposed to be developing maybe some of these skills of resiliency, of regulation, of interpersonal relationships, right? And so they've lost out on those lessons. And so where DBT and DBT skills comes in is we are now helping them to learn those skills, right? So we can't just tell somebody who has a skill deficit, well, live skillfully. Well, how? I don't have those skills. I don't know how to use those skills, right? And even if I do know how to use them, I've not been in a situation therapeutically or effectively in my life to be able to put them into practice and really learn mastery of those skills. And so that's where adding in some DBT skills can be really, really helpful, is then we are allowing people to learn the skills, use the skills, and be supported in their practice and their utilization of these skills. Okay. So some general functions or goals in DBT, and there's far more than these. There are aspects of the DBT functioning and goals related to the therapist, right? So in true DBT counseling, there is an aspect of collaboration. So you're receiving support from other professionals as you're working with populations that are sometimes difficult to work with, or can be very draining, or can be very, very rewarding at the same time. But so these are not all of the functions of DBT, but these are some of the highlights. So the first aspect of DBT is to enhance the individual's capabilities. Again, we talked about that. It's a strength-based approach, right? And we want to increase the individual's ability to respond to life skillfully. So basically enhancing those capabilities, taking those people who have a skill deficit and giving them and providing them with skills, right, that they do need. The second part of it is generalizing those capabilities, basically working towards those individuals being able to apply their skills, right, in their daily lives and in their natural environment, right? So it's translation of skills from session or from group or from treatment into their daily life, right? Because again, they can have all these tools and all these skills, but if there isn't a translation, if it isn't something that becomes normalized or is put into practice, is, you know, kind of ingrained through repetition and through support, right? Those aren't going to do them any good, right? And so it's not only having them learn those capabilities and learn those skills, but also utilizing them and translating them into their daily life. And then finally, improving motivation and reducing dysfunctional behavior. So basically, a big thing that we do when we want to help people who are addicted, right? We want to enhance their motivation when they have it. Basically, DBT can be very, very helpful with people who are treatment resistant or treatment resistant populations, right? And working towards reducing behaviors that go against the changes that that person wants to see, right? So in moving towards developing a life worth living, or in this case, with people who are addicted, is creating a meaningful life without the use of substances, right? So again, providing skills, translating skills to everyday life, and then building on motivation and reducing dysfunctional behaviors are the main functions.
Amber, one question
Yep.
before we move on. Somebody typed in wanting to know maybe a definition or what is meant by interpersonal effectiveness. This might be a good point to address that.
Yeah, so interpersonal effectiveness is their ability to have effective relationships with others while also maintaining self-respect, right? So it's my ability to maintain how I feel about myself within my relationships, right? So when we get to those skills, we're going to talk about skills specific to that allow, and depending on the interaction you're having, it might be a different skill, but in general, interpersonal relationships or interpersonal effectiveness is your ability to effectively maintain relationships or interact with other people while also maintaining your own self-respect and your own values. Okay.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I appreciate the question. So if you guys have further questions as we're going through it, please feel free to and to throw them out. And I don't ever mind being in the middle of the webinar, because sometimes otherwise we get away from the page and we're away from the conversation, and so it can be helpful to do it at the same time. Okay, so as I said before, there has been more and more research that is coming out that is showing the effectiveness of DBT services. And also, I suppose I haven't even said what DBT is. So DBT is Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. Probably should have started with that. The next slide we go to, we're going to kind of dive into a little bit of what that dialectical means. But so more and more we are receiving research that shows that DBT can be effective for other populations besides just those who struggle with borderline personality disorder. And so that being said, Marshall Linehan has even come out with these different resources specific to addiction and specific to substance abuse. And so the rest of the skills that we're going to talk about, we're going to have generalized DBT skills, which will work for all populations. And then we're going to touch on and talk about some of the specific addiction DBT skills. So some of the DBT skills for crisis or for those who struggle with addiction is the DCBA. So D, dialectical abstinence. We're going to talk a little bit more in depth with that. C, clear mind and community reinforcement. B, burning bridges and building new ones. And A, alternative rebellion and adaptive denial. So just because we have these specific addiction skills and addiction ways of looking at, or specific DBT ways of looking at addiction and recovery, does not mean that the other DBT skills do not also apply to addiction. It just means they're a little bit more specialized. So as we're going to go through this, there are going to be handouts that are going to be on there. Some of them look better than others. I know we're all stuck at home and I don't have a scanner. I used what I had at my resources. So I apologize if the quality is not that great, but hopefully enough of the information is clear. All of the information that is going to be dealing with the handouts comes directly from Marshall Linehan's DBT training handbooks and worksheets, which is available, for purchase from any general reseller, of books. So the D from DBT is dialectics. So what does that actually mean? So dialectics refers to the synthesis of two opposites. Synthesis meaning to create, basically bringing together of two, right? So a fundamental principle is creating a dynamic that promotes two opposed goals and bringing them together. So change and acceptance, right? Another way that it's often referred to through DBT services is called walking that middle path, right? We're moving from black and white to gray, right? And so as we look at this handout that's right next to us, it shows some examples. So in DBT, another big idea or theme is the three states of mind. Okay, so we have our emotion mind. So our emotion mind is based in our feelings. We use our feelings as our facts. It's impulsive, right? And then we have our reasonable mind, which is all facts, all reason, no emotion, right? And the place we want to get to and we want to live from is called our wise mind. So it's the synthesis of both our reason mind and our emotion mind, right? But those aren't the only minds that we have, right? So we have things like our doing mind and our nothing to do mind, right? Intense desire for change in the moment or radical acceptance of the moment, right? So throughout our lives and throughout different things and different things that we think about, we have these sometimes polar opposites, right? So for example, when people are starting to get clean, right? I'm doing everything I can. There's nothing more I can give. I'm doing all that I can do to change, and it's not good enough, right? And then the other opposite of, well, I need to be trying harder, right? And I need to be putting in the work and I need to put in more, right? And so when you look at those thoughts, it's okay, well, those are opposite. It's black and white, right? They don't have anything in common, right? And so dialectics refers to having that acceptance and having the merging of that these two polar opposite things can both be true. It can be true that I am doing everything that I can and I need to try harder, right? So it's the merging of these two things is what dialectics means. So again, self-denial, self-indulgence, bringing them together. Okay. So let's look at the dialectics for addicts. So in Marshall Linehan's resources for when addiction is the crisis, when addiction is the main problem, right? So she calls it the addict mind, the clean mind, and the clear mind, okay? And so when we break this down into the addict mind, it's I need to use to feel better, right? I can't face a day without a high. Nothing is ever going to change or nothing has ever changed. So what even is the point? Right. And when we first get clean, when we first get clean or when individuals get clean, right? Many times we warn about that honeymoon period, right? That euphoria that comes with when you first getting clean because you're making a change, you're feeling better, right? But when we get stuck in just clean mind, right, it can be naive. It can be deceiving because it's, I'm clean, I'm feeling so good, nothing would ever make me want to use again, right? Every day in recovery is going to be a good day. I've changed way too much and I've tried too hard. I'm never going to have cravings again. But what we know about addiction and what we know about that honeymoon period and that clean mind or that rational mind is parts of that are true, right? They might not ever want to use again and they might be feeling really great. But what that thinking does, and if we only have that thinking, right, it can lead us to making decisions that put us at risk, right? If I think I'm never going to have a craving again, maybe I go around people or places or things that in the past have given me cravings, right? And so then I'm not making positive decisions, right? And then the addict mind, we don't want to be completely stuck there because chances are we're probably going to use, right? If we're thinking I need to use to feel better, I can't face the day without getting high, it's probably going to influence me to make decisions that lead to use, right? So then again, if both of these things are true, how do we create that synthesis? How do we create that middle path, right? Where I am both acknowledging and validating the reality of both. So I've gone ahead and I've created the green highlighting for the addict mind, because it can be sometimes challenging of, well, how is that valid? Because I don't want to tell myself that I need to use to feel better, right? Because that's not helpful to me, right? So I've highlighted the parts that when we're trying to move towards clear mind or wise mind that we would want to emphasize, right? It's the I need to feel better, right? Because the validation there is I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling right. Something needs to happen, right? And so the middle ground, the clear mind would be, right, I am feeling down, or I'm feeling insert emotion here, right? I can't use, but I can do something else to feel better. So I'm validating that emotion or that situation while also validating, okay, well, I can't use and I need to do something else to feel better, right? That I can't face a day without the high, right? Again, not a helpful thought, probably might lead to using. So I can't face the day, right? So right now I'm validating and I'm acknowledging that right now something is making it hard for me to do that. But I also want to bring in my clean mind. So, right, so it's hard to face the day right now, but I can through recovery, right? So it's bringing them together, right? And then again, down at the bottom, nothing feels like it's ever changed. So nothing will change unless I continue to work towards change. I can do this skillfully. Right, so it's bringing it together. Okay, so have some more kind of handouts for dialectics. These ones are specific to addiction. Okay, so talking a little bit more about what is dialectical abstinence. Okay, so again, if we remember, dialectical means bringing two opposites synthesis together to create a middle path. And many of us, whether we be professionals, individuals, when we face the ideal of addiction, it is always total abstinence, right? Because that's where we want to be, or that's where we want people to be. And again, it's not to say that that is a bad thing, right? But when we face it in just that one state of mind of abstinence is the only way, and abstinence is the only thing. When reality does not match that, right, it can lead to this vicious cycle of abstinence is the only thing, because relapse, unfortunately, is a part of addiction. I relapse or I lapse, and now I get so down on myself that I made that mistake. I tell myself I've lost everything that I've built. I get stuck in my relapse, and then I get back to recovery, and abstinence is the only thing, right? And it creates this vicious cycle, right? And so dialectical abstinence is the merging of both abstinence, so I need to swear off my addictive behavior and I need to move away from it, but also harm reduction, basically acknowledging that there may be slips, right? And the important thing is to minimize the impact of those, right? And so that's the synthesis, that dialectical abstinence. The goal is not to engage in addictive behaviors again, but also to acknowledge that should there be a slip, I should try to minimize my harm and get back to where I was, right? And so it's a shifting of perspective and helping individuals through DBT be able to do this, right? To be able to shift that perspective of should I slip, or should I mess up, or what it is that I'm working towards. This is the one next to it. The handout 18 is just another handout of what I was talking about in the previous slide of the addict mind, clear mind, clean mind, giving some instruction and some explanation of what those mean. And so don't need to go into further detail, but if you notice there, it says both extremes are very dangerous, right? So again, clean mind can just be as dangerous as addict mind if we are oblivious to the dangers or not really acknowledging and validating maybe some aspects of the other mind. Okay, so for this next page, I have just included some resources for you guys to look at that is available for kind of utilizing this. If you work with those who struggle with addiction, you probably have seen something very similar to this and called it something else, whether it be a recovery plan, a relapse plan, right? This is just the same thing in the form of like a DBT resource, right? So it's planning for dialectical abstinence, right? So it's doing things like including things that you're going to do, some skills, right? And then plan for harm reduction. So what would I do if I were to have a slip, right? As well as kind of looking at, on the very last page, what are my extreme thinking? What is some middle ground thinking, right? So looking at some of that. And it's got the skills on there that we're going to be talking about later. So having a plan for a relapse, or having a plan should it happen, or doing those things and reinforcing that dialectical abstinence can be helpful, right? So should individuals slip or relapse, right, it's not getting stuck in that same cycle, and they're able to have their plan to move forward and back to recovery, back to that clear mind. Okay, so we're going to start diving into some of the 4 core skill-based building things. Now, as we're going through this, there is much more to DBT than just skills, right? There's other concepts and tenets and different things, right? Validation being one of them, and all of these other things, right? So this one is strictly about skills. So I'm not touching on a lot of that, but it does not mean they do not exist and are not important for DBT. Okay, so acceptance and mindfulness. So in DBT, several interventions and skills are geared towards basically conveying acceptance of the individual and helping that individual to accept him or herself, others, and the world, right? And places we already see this in treatment for addiction. Think about the AA tenets of accepting life on life's terms, the serenity prayer, right? These are concepts that are already existent or already in existence within the recovery field or within recovery. It's just basically the packaging is a little bit different, and that it's skill-based rather than just concept, right? It's taking that concept and moving it into a tangible skill of how do I actually do that? How do I actually accept life on life's terms, right? So in DBT, mindfulness skills help individuals attend to what is happening in the present. Some of the mindfulness skills can involve attending to and non-judgmentally observing the current experience, describing the facts, fully participating in the activity, so being in the here and now. Basically, and so again, some of those concepts, if we relate it to things that we already know or maybe are already in existence, the one day at a time, right? In the here and now, right? And again, same concepts, different packaging. Over here, we've got just another worksheet that talks a little bit about the skills. So in Marshall Lanahan's skill book, there's always like the introduction one, and then it takes you into more depth. So this is one of the introduction ones as you get into the mindfulness skill training. So we have what skills and how skills, which we are going to go through. Okay, so why is mindfulness for addicts? So on one side here we have what skills. So it's to observe, describe, and participate. So what skills are intended to pull us into the here and now, right? So by causing me to be mindful, right? So being mindful simply means tuning into maybe my surroundings, tuning into my sensations, tuning into, you know, the moment. And so I start to observe, right? So we teach clients maybe how to observe body sense, right? Observe and pay attention to, like, what is my purpose in this moment? So pulling them into kind of what they're going on and living purposefully or acting purposefully, right? Basically learning how to observe inside and outside of yourself, right? So what's going on within me, what's going on without, you know, from without. And then describing it, helping them start to put words to these things, right? And then working towards fully participating in the moment, right? So by doing this, we are helping clients learn how to ground, right? When we are lost in a craving, when we're lost in the past or we're lost in our emotions. Being able to ground can pull me from that and into myself, or outside of myself and into the moment, which can be extremely helpful when maybe we're used to making impulsive decisions. We're used to acting without thinking, right? And so learning how to be mindful and practicing how to be mindful can be extremely helpful. So another aspect here is part of a lot of people who work towards recovery. They get involved in 12-step programming, and a big part of that is spirituality and developing that. And so here it's just, again, a good resource that Marsha Linehan has included in her skill book, which is Wise Mind from a Spiritual Perspective, right? So if somebody has, you know, like that spiritual aspect, or it even has mysticism, right? So different ways that you can look at mindfulness while engaging a strength, right? Because again, it's a strength-based approach. So it's a way to engage this mindfulness from a strength-based situation. Okay, so moving on to the next one, which is interpersonal effectiveness. Basically, these skills are taught, the skills that are taught are intended to maximize the chances that a person's goals in a specific situation will be met. So when they're interacting with another person, right, in a relationship, whether it be this is my probation officer, this is a romantic relationship, a paternal relationship, whatever it is, right? Any given situation, while at the same time not damaging either the relationships or that person's own self-respect. Okay. And what we know from some research is that interpersonal stress can be a major triggering point for individuals learning skills to effectively cope, especially those who struggle with addiction. And again, many people who are struggling with addiction started at a young age. All they have ever known is addiction. Maybe they got into a relationship while they were actively in addiction, and now they're getting sober, right? And so now they're having these interactions with this other person that's important in their life that they've never had before. They've never interacted with them sober. They've never had a disagreement with them while they're sober, right? And so those old reactions, those old ways of doing those are now gone, right? And so again, we want to help give them the skills to effectively do these things, right? So over here, basically obtaining our objective skillfully. So there are different areas that are taught. Some of the skills I'm going to talk about are some of these, not all of these, but all of these are important components to teaching interpersonal effectiveness. So the first place where we start is helping individuals kind of clarify what are their priorities, right? So in this interaction with the other person, what is my actual goal, right? Am I trying to get something for myself? Am I trying to, you know, keep the relationship? Am I trying to end the relationship? Am I trying to maintain my own self-respect within this situation, right? What am I actually trying to get out of this situation, right? And here, again, we're building, right? So if we've developed and we've built on our mindfulness, I hopefully will be able to have that internal awareness to be able to answer some of these questions of what am I actually trying to get out of this situation, right? So some of the skills is Dear Man. So Dear Man is a skill that we use when we are trying to be assertive and asking for something for ourselves, right? What we would like out of the situation, or trying to get something for ourselves. Give is basically just trying to interact with somebody in our life in a good way and have good communication with them. Fast is a skill that helps us interact in a situation while maintaining our self-respect, right? So if at the beginning I'm clarifying my priorities, right? And if I'm in a situation and I have that awareness of, okay, in this situation, I'm trying to ask for something. I'm trying to ask for something. I know I need to use a Dear Man, right? Or if in this situation, I'm just trying to have a conversation, I know I need to use Give skill, right? So part of this isn't just teaching them the skills. Part of this is taking them through the process of learning how to know when to use a skill, right? Because I can have a wrench all I want, but if I don't know when I'm supposed to use it, and get an opportunity to practice it and think about all the different scenarios when I might use it, it's going to be a pretty useless tool for me, right? It's the same thing for DBT skills or any other skills, is I need to practice it. I need to be taught and given an opportunity to learn how to best put it into practice. Okay. So Dear Man skills. So the skills are acronyms. So D is for describe, right? So we would use facts, describe the certain situation to somebody, tell the person exactly what you are reacting to. We need to express. You express your feelings and your opinions about the situation. And it's important to not assume that the other person knows how you feel. So the example is, you told me you would be home by dinner, but you weren't here till 11. So facts, right? Express, when you come home so late, I worry about you, right? So you're expressing where you're coming from it. So then assert, asking, right? Reinforcing, mindful, appear confident, negotiate. So each aspect of this, we would break down for the client, and we would teach them and go through it and practice it, do different scenarios, right? When we're skill building and when we're teaching skills. So why Dear Man for the addict, right? So unfortunately, an aspect of addiction is that we keep a lot of things hidden. We don't want others to know how sick we are. We want to keep using, so we learn to manipulate, we learn to lie, we learn how to do those things to maintain our addiction, right? And when we're moving into recovery, we're moving away from manipulative functioning, right? And now we are moving into healthy. So if I've never done that, I don't know how. I don't have the skill. Dear Man is a skill to teach somebody how to get themselves something that they want in an effective way, without the need for manipulative communication, without the need for manipulative things, right? So basically, this skill is enhancing their communication skills with the people in their lives, right? As well as allowing them a way of getting themselves what they need and what they want that will help maintain their self-respect and help move away from those old ways of thinking and old ways of being. All right, so give and fast. So give, again, is basically when you want to basically maintain your relationship. And give is just basic communication skills. Again, if we started using when we were teenagers and we've never been clean and we've never been sober, we might not know how to do this, right? So it might seem very blatantly obvious to somebody who is functioning, but somebody who's never been at a functioning level before, this is all new information, right? So give is being gentle, being interested, validating, and having an easy manner. Basically helping somebody learn how to interact with somebody, right? How to have a good, positive, effective communication with somebody. This can be helpful for addicts or people who struggle with addiction because, right, so maybe they're told to go out, make new sober friends, get involved, maybe go to meetings, and they're like, I don't know how to talk to people. How do you make friends as an adult if you're not drinking, right? So these are skills that help that, right? If I know how to act in a situation, how to be interested, how to engage, it reduces my anxiety of doing that because I know I can enter that situation and be skillful. So fast is a way to maintain your own self-respect, right? So it's being fair to yourself and others, apologizing, either knowing how to apologizing or not apologizing, right? Sticking to your values and being truthful. So a situation where fast might come in handy for somebody who struggles with addiction and is getting clean and sober is we tell people, just say no. Tell people you can't go there, you can't drink, or you can't be around that stuff. Again, we're asking somebody to be skillful who has no skills or has very little skills or hasn't had an opportunity to put them into practice. So being able to practice this, to teach this of how do I do that, right? That's where fast comes in. So basically, these skills are building new relationships, are helpful for building new relationships within recovery, responding to people in their life who have only known them while using, and basically increasing their effective communication. Okay, so one of the things specific to Marshall Linehan's DBT for addicts, where addicts is the crisis, is community reinforcement, right? And it is, again, same concept, different packaging. It's basically the changing your playmate, play places, and play things that are, we've often seen in 12-step community, support networking, and basically what is encouraged of individuals who are getting into recovery by creating an enjoyable life without the use of substances. And so it just really breaks that down of kind of the reinforcing abstinence, right? And how to go about that, replacing addictive reinforcers with abstinence reinforcers, and then abstinence sampling. It's a very behavioral way of addressing these things because, hey, the B in DBT is behavioral. So it would make sense that there would be very heavy behavioral work. Okay. So here, some things that we can work with our clients on, or individuals, or important things for them to question are, what gets in the way of me being effective in my interpersonal relationships, right? Because again, DBT is a strength-based approach. So if I can identify the barriers, I can utilize my strengths to overcome those barriers, right? So these are important conversations for us to have, right? Because if we have this conversation and I identify that my emotions get in the way, right? I have the skills, but I get too mad, I get too hurt, I just become too overwhelmed with my emotions to be able to use my skills, right? What that tells me and the person that I'm working with is that maybe we need to work on my distress tolerance. Maybe we need to work on my ability to emotionally regulate, right? And so how we go about addressing those barriers for, like, if your emotions are getting in the way is going to be different than if my thoughts and my beliefs are getting in the way, right? If my thoughts and my beliefs are getting in the way, we might focus more in on the wise mind, rational mind, or clear mind, addict mind, emotion mind, rational mind, right? We might focus more in on that and skills related to that to get me to be able to be more skillful, right? So questioning these things and having these conversations are important, as well as looking at basically myths. Okay, so again, this is related to those thoughts and beliefs. This would be a resource that would help me address some of that with the person who's my helper. Okay, so distress tolerance. So what is distress tolerance? Distress tolerance are behaviors, basically, or skills or behaviors. It allows me to tolerate and survive crises while accepting the moment. Basically, how can I get through this a moment without making it worse, right? So there are 4 sets of crisis survival strategies that are taught in DBT, which is distracting, self-soothing, improving the moment, and thinking of pros and cons. As well as some acceptance skills. So it can include radical acceptance, turning the mind towards acceptance, willingness versus willfulness. Again, different terms, or same concepts, different packaging. So if we think about self-will versus higher powers will, serenity prayer again, right? It's these different things that are already exist within addiction recovery. So again, goals of distress tolerance is to survive the crisis situation without making it worse, accepting reality as it is, replacing suffering and being stuck with ordinary pain and the possibility of moving forward, changing our perception of it, and becoming free, basically, of having to satisfy our own demands, desires, urges, and intense emotions. So basically removing the urgency. So for an addict, it might be the becoming free is just because I'm having a craving does not mean I have to act on it, right? And accepting that reality, right? And getting through it without making it worse. Okay, so here I have some of the resources that are available in Marshall Linehan's book related to the distracting, the self-soothing, and improving the moment. So it has so many different things. So it's distracting with accept. So accept is activities contributing comparisons, emotions, pushing away thoughts, and then sensations. So each of those things is a step within accepts. And even within each of those steps are there a bunch of different options. I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, when I'm working with people, we'll be going through this, well, that doesn't work for me, or that doesn't work for me. I've tried that before. That'll never work, right? And so a big part of this is having a lot to pull from. But the other thing that I remind the people that I work with when we're working about DBT skills is, just like anything, it's not going to work right away. And just like anything, it's not a magical cure for these things, right? So the most important thing to do is to try them and keep trying them and keep trying them. And the more that we do them, the more effective they become, right? So that's the distracting, the self-soothing with the five senses. So using your five senses and doing different things within them to help ground yourself and help soothe yourself. And then improving the moment, so with improve. So it's using imagery, meaning, prayer, relaxation, one thing in the moment, vacation, encouragement, and rethinking the situation. So again, as we teach the people that we work with these things, we are breaking it down. We are going through it slowly, right? We are talking about each one. We're practicing each one. We're having them give examples. We're going through it, right? That's a big part of skill training, right? Is that it's a learning and it's a repetition. Okay, so distress tolerance for the addicts. So from the DCBA from the beginning, it's the burning bridges and building new ones, right? So the burning bridges is accept at the most radical level that you are not going to engage in addictive behavior again, and then move actively to cut off all addictive behavior options, right? So doing things like number 2, creating a list of things in your life that makes your addiction possible. The next step, getting rid of those things. So if I know I have paraphernalia, I'm getting rid of it, right? And we're helping our clients do some of this, of creating these things, and it's that burning the bridges between us and our addiction. And then building new bridges. So creating visual images, smells that compete with the information loaded into your visual or olfactory brain systems when craving occurs. So what are my alternatives, right? Where am I building bridges, right? So I'm burning those one and I'm building these ones. And so we work with them to replace, to avoid, and do those things specifically. Okay, so emotional regulation is our ability to turn up or turn down the volume on our emotions. And substance use is a common reaction to emotional stimulation, especially when the person has been struggling with addiction and they want to regulate their emotions. Their first thought or their first action is, I need to get high. I can't handle this, right? And so again, here we have a skill deficit that DBT works towards addressing. There I have some of the skills listed for emotional regulation. But I want to get to some of these handouts. So there's different things that we can do for emotional regulation. There's checking the facts, right? So helping our clients learn how to identify the event. What are our thoughts? What are our emotions, right? And then examining, right? Do these thoughts, do these feelings fit the situation? Am I assuming, right? Am I catastrophizing? Am I interpreting the situation from a different lens than maybe the other person is, right? We teach them how to question some things, question their thinking. Opposite action, right? If I feel like isolating myself, I go around other people. If I feel like hurting myself, I soothe myself, right? So teaching that opposite reaction. And then honestly, doing problem solving, teaching somebody how to problem solve. Again, it might seem very straightforward, but if I've never learned those things, I've never learned those things. And so teaching our individuals how to do those things. Okay, so to conclude, basically DBT and DBT skill building can be very beneficial to those who are struggling with addiction. And there's various ways that DBT or DBT skills can be used while working with addicts and integrated into the services that are already being provided. And my biggest recommendation is, if any of this has interested you, or you have been intrigued by this, look for training for DBT, right? It's the best place to start. It's going to give you more in-depth learning into the core of what DBT is and other facets of this approach, right? Or even if you want DBT for yourself, right? there's so many resources out there. But I have here the resource that I used for our handouts that were in our presentation today, and it's Marsha Linehan's DBT skills training handouts and worksheets. But there are so many resources out there. So that is what I have for your resources. I am not the, first most expert in this, but it is something that I have found very, very helpful, and hope maybe you guys can find it helpful. So I guess I'll pass it over to Dr. Letcher if we have any questions, or to close out what we need to do.
Yes, so if there are any questions, feel free to type those in. We've got a few minutes left, and I'm sure Amber is happy to share more with us. As you were talking, the themes of empowerment and acceptance really came to mind, and those seem like such universal skills that we want people to have. And I wondered if these type of this approach is appropriate when you're working with maybe like a family so there is a member who has an addiction. Do you also try to teach some of these skills to the family members?
I do. So especially when I work with adolescents and their parents. So talking about effective communication skills and interpersonal relationship skills, and reminding parents and other family members that they're humans too. So when their loved one who maybe is struggling is becoming emotionally dysregulated, it is very easy for us, even though we're coming from a helping position or a parent position, to become just as emotionally dysregulated. And so helping parents learn how to take those steps back, how to do some of that grounding, and how to help their child do some of that grounding can be very, very helpful, because we're all people, whether we're a parent or a teacher or anybody. And so again, having that self-empowerment of them and having that validation of where they're at. And for parents, sometimes, especially now with school being online, it's that validation and that synthesis of, my child needs to get their schoolwork done, and I also need to understand that my child is facing something that they've never faced before right now, and so it might be difficult for them. And so bringing together those two things of, so how do we go about making sure we're getting done what we need to get done, but also validating that this is a difficult situation. So doing some of that with parents can be helpful to help them kind of understand.
Excellent. One more question here. How do you effectively apply these skills with clients that have attention disorders?
So it can be very, very challenging, right? And so a lot of it is repetition, and maybe not having it in a way that is, how do I explain it? So it's not necessarily structured of, we have to do this to get to that, to get to that. Because somebody who has attention difficulties probably can't do that for very long, of the boom, 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 boom. And so a lot of it is modifying, right? And working with your client and developing that therapeutic rapport. So you kind of know, and you can kind of clue in of, oh, they're diverting, or they're not able to stick with this any longer. Finding activities, making it engaging, right? So if we can engage. So one thing that I do with my teens that I work with is I have these cards, which is the Dbt Deck, right? And so we work through this, and they have different things that you can do. And so it's really just trying to find ways to make it work for you, right? If these handouts and these packets, like, I know my teens, they would not handle those well, where maybe somebody that I work with that is older or in a different space would be able to and would find those helpful. It's really just trying to make it your own and modifying it. The biggest thing is getting the skill across and providing opportunities for them to practice those skills.
Great. One more question here. In your experience, has DBT worked better in a group setting or individual?
So true DBT is meant to work on different levels, right? So DBT, true DBT is, you have individual sessions where that individual is able to work through crises and get kind of that individual thing. And then the group is skill training, where it is not processing, it is not talking about crises, it is not doing that. The only thing the group is for is building those skills, practicing those skills, talking about those skills. And then they have support, which is their ability to contact, like an on-call or different things. And then the therapist receives support. So that's DBT in its pure form. As far as what I have learned, I I think that the group works really well to keep it very skill focused, because when we're an individual, it's very easy for us, as we're talking about skills and teaching skills, and we're talking about examples or when it could have worked for us, to get sucked into the story and get sucked into the processing, because that's what we do. So the group kind of helps keep that a little bit separate of, this is for skills, this is for processing. So again, it's really individualized of what's going to work for you. And being able to create space and know that you do need time for both, and whether or not having it all in one works for you or having it separate. But yeah. Yep.
I don't see any other questions here. If you do come up with something later, I'm sure Amber will be more than happy to answer those via email. We can definitely get you in touch with her. I'll put in one more plug. Please complete our survey just for feedback about the session. And if you have recommendations for future webinars, we'd love to hear those. You'll be able to access a recording of this webinar on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search for Strengthening the Heartland, you'll see lots and lots of webinars there for you to use. Please feel free to share those, spread them widely for us. Oh, one more question just popped up in here. How long would it take for someone with no prior experience in DBT to become a facilitator or an expert user?
An expert, I can't speak on that because I'm definitely not an expert. I am trained, but there are all sorts of DBT training. I know the state offers DBT training, or has offered DBT training. PESI has offered DBT training, which is where I took mine through. So it was a 2-hour or a 2-day, 4 to 6 hour training. And so as far as mastery goes, I'm sure there's all sorts of different things you can do. But as far as training goes, there are plenty of opportunities to get training in DBT, if you seek them out.
So it's a kind of a 2-day training. Is there any like coaching afterwards, or is
As
it?
far as I went to, no, it was just an introduction and training into DBT. Again, Marsha Linehan has her own institute. And so if you really, really found this and you really want to dive headfirst into it, I encourage you to go visit that website for Marsha Linehan's institute. Because again, I'm sure there are ways where you can become a pure DBT therapist and really, really dive into that training. But as far as on my end, I've only received like general training in it to introduce me into it, and to be able to effectively apply these concepts. So.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Amber, and for all of you for joining us. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.